make sure you're very clear. If you're in a moment of a relationship, you have to be very clear up front, because directions and agreements is something I want you to also consider. Amos chapter 3, verse 3, it says, do two walk together unless they have agreed to meet? Okay, this is the question that the prophet says, how can two people walk side by side if they're not headed in the right direction? Let me make this clear. The Israelites are having so much issue at this point because it seems like God is making it clear. He's saying that you're not walking with me, you're walking in a different direction. Therefore, your heart is no longer aligning with mine. That's what God is telling the people of Israel. In this case, our relationship with somebody that is making sure that they are not just Christians, but are they also walking in the same way, okay? When I say walk, I mean like they are walking side beside you, not you dragging them or them dragging you, because then that's not walking side by side. That's you trying to put them in a position where they need to be, and that's not our job. We are not responsible for their walk with God, okay? Same vice versa as well. You have to make sure you keep your standards in a point where I'm walking with God, and if you want to pursue me, then you better walk with God as well. So that's what I'm saying is don't put ourselves to where we are dependent on one another. We should be dependent on God. So because of that, this is where I want us to think about. If you are walking in different spiritual directions, you also have to put that in consideration as well. As Christians, we are all put in different directions. Think of it as a race. We're all running the same race. As Christians, that's what we do. But every person runs at a different pace. So you have to understand too is that if someone is running and they're moving in their direction, okay, then can you keep up with that person? Is that who you want to keep that pace with? If not, then you have to know where's your pace, okay? And you have to understand what is it that you do in a sense. So what I try to tell everybody is that think about this in context. If you are called to go to ministry, to go to Vietnam, or go to do some mission trip, right? That's your calling. That's the pace that they're going. But you also have to think about this too. If that's not the calling God has put you, that may not be the right fit. What happens is you may end up compromising, giving up your call in order to follow their calling. And that's going to be, that will lead to destruction. Why is that? We're both Christians, right? It is. But you have to know God is calling each of us for something. So you have to make sure. I remember when I was talking, before I met my wife, I prayed specifically. I was in Vietnam for my first year on a mission trip. And I said, and I remember I was with a group of kids teaching, doing VBS. My pastor said, I need you to speak in Vietnamese to them. I was like, oh man, that's gonna be hard, right? But I tried. I tried enough to where I struggled, and I realized I need help. I said, God, if I go back to US, I asked her, can you help me to where I can learn Vietnamese, and that I could go ahead and continue on with the mission to do your work in Vietnam. Long story short, I come back home, and at church, there was a class, a Vietnamese class that was open for little kids. I said, no big deal, I can go in and just learn Vietnamese. Right? There's 2 sessions. There's a morning and an afternoon. So I signed up for the afternoon session, and I walked in, and I didn't see anybody. I just saw was one person who was the teacher. And if you guys know the story behind that, because it was something God's put in my heart, one thing led to another. The person that was teaching me is a person who I married, okay? Now, I have to make sure she was like older than me, okay? So just kind of give you a little context here, because it was something that God had put in my heart for a while. I came into the missionary trip thinking that I want to be single for the rest of my life. But it's because, why did I say that? It was giving up a little bit who I am. It was no longer about me searching for somebody. I said, I'm done with that. I was in a bad relationship before I even came to that decision. But when I put my heart knowing God's calling for me to go to Vietnam, I said, I want to give this up and stop searching. But boy, was I wrong, because that's when God can intervene in, okay? So what I share with you is that we have to be very clear with our intentions, because when we seek for for marriage, our dating is going to be all about evaluation. When you evaluate, this is where it gets a little harder, because here's where I'm going to go into my third point today, which is this: act in faith and trust God's timing. You have to realize in your moment when you're dating, when you evaluate, my first thing I want you to think about is this. On Genesis 24, verse 58, they called Rebekah. This is Rebekah's family. They called Rebekah and asked her, will you go with this man? Okay? After the servant had convinced that this is a person for Isaac, he brought in the jewelries. He brought in the nose ring stuff. He got everything for her, right? And she was like, wait, what's going on? Suddenly, she invites him to his family, and the family's talking about it. And he says, she says, don't hold me back, because this is what the Lord has brought me here for, And so the family was like, well, we're going to have to talk to Rebekah about this, because this is not something that, Rebekah, what do you think? And here's what she says: I will go, okay? Knowing that right intention. Here's what I'm trying to say from this point here. We need to walk in obedience without any delay. In Psalm 119:6, he says, I will hasten and not delay to obey your commands. Now, let me make this point clearly, okay? In a moment that you are dating somebody, you have to be very clear and honest. Because if you feel God is bringing clarity and peace in your life, then you know that this marriage is going to build up to get married. But if you know right away there are some things you feel like it's not right, you don't feel peace about it, then you also have to be clear and make that decision. Don't linger on it. Don't just drag the relationship, because it's only going to make it worse. Because it ends up making where you are trying to lead onto them and they have no idea. So be open and honest about that. The very beginning that I said, dating is not a status, it's a process. It is not about entertainment, it's about evaluation. It's simply evaluating, okay, where you end up in one of two ways. Remember that. Either you will get married to that person or you'll break up, right? So let me read this. When the evaluation is not giving you peace, don't drag it out, okay? But when the evaluation is giving you peace, don't rush what God is building. If you see peace in your heart and you know that you're going to pursue together in marriage, don't rush it. Let it naturally progress. See what I'm saying? Because everyone goes through different stages in life. So you got college, jobs, right? Let it continue to build and to keep evaluating. But if you know right off that there isn't any peace to be with that person, don't linger on it. Don't keep dragging this out. Don't think, well, because if I don't have that person, then people are going to look at me weird. Don't worry about that. That's not about them. It's you and God, right? So here's my biggest conclusion here that I want us to think about. I want us to think about evaluating yourself first. How much are you seriously considering marriage as a serious step? Because if you are serious about pursuing marriage, then you take dating with a purpose. You need to make sure that your intention is to come to the Lord first. Pray about it. Set that standard. Don't compromise, okay? But keep that standard there. And if they're a Christian, right? You're like, well, they're a Christian. Yeah, but look intentionally of what they're doing. Seek after what they see. Don't just, stalk them, right? But gaze at them. See what they're doing. You would start to see, because as much as you are gazing at them, they're gazing at you. So the intention is you also must have that relationship with God. Amen?